Okay, good morning and welcome. My name is Lee Ferris, and I'll be the chairman for the upcoming school year. And we're going to before we get started, want to do an introduction to the board members. So we'll start with Leslie and then just go snake our way down the board.
Good morning. I'm Leslie Watson, and I'm the Executive Secretary of the Alternative Ed Council. And I also work with the Department on Non-Traditional Education Programs. And I'll pass this to Josiah.
Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Josiah Holland from Franklin, Tennessee. I'm the director of our Williamson County Schools Alternative Learning Center. I've been here going into my 8th school year. I've never worked at one job that long in my life, so that's exciting. I don't know what that says about me and my commitment, but here I am. And then I've been on the board since, I think 2020 was my first year, so about 4 or 5 years. And I'm going to pass to Martina.
Good morning. My name is Martina Stump. I am the Director of Education at the Department of Children's Services, and happy to be here. I'm going to pass it to Scott.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Scott Innermill, Senior Director for IDEA and Non-Traditional Education Programs. And again, I'm not one of the board members per se, but I do typically attend these meetings because I work with Leslie very closely. I'll pass it to Brian.
Good morning. Hey, I'm Brian Douglas. I'm a student support supervisor for Cocke County Schools, and one of my duties is I'm the principal of 3 alternative programs. Our Three Rivers Learning Center, which is a 6 through 12 program. We have a K through 5 program called the Learning Center, and we have a graduation program called Gateway Programs, where we help folks graduate with a state diploma. Glad to be here and good to see everyone. I'll pass over to, is it Glenn Wolfenbarger? Is that right? That's your first name?
Yes, I'm not on the board. I'm just TAEA board member, Glenn Wolfenbarger. This is starting my 4th year here at the alternative school and 19th overall. I'm in Jefferson County. And I don't know who's left. I can't see that.
We can pass to Melita.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Melita Thomas here in Memphis, Shelby County Schools. Yes, I did it. I'm finished.
Way to go.
Breathe. I'm here in Memphis, Shelby County Schools. I've been working in alternative schools for 22 years. I'm now, we have 8 school sites, including an incarcerated youth program, a program for students new to the country, and an over age for grade program, and our traditional alternative schools. Glad to be here with everyone this morning. Happy Tuesday, 2nd day of school for us. And I'll pass it to, let's see here. Are we Chandrea?
That's right.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Chandrea Hersey. I'm the Senior Associate Counsel for Civil Rights and Academic Supports. I'm so legal counsel for the Non-Traditional Education Program team, and I support Leslie and Scott with their work with the Alternative Education Council. I'll pass it to Courtney.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Courtney Boykin. I am an assistant counsel on Chandrea's team. We work with civil rights and academic supports, which she already stated. And I think, has Janetta gone? Or am I the last one?
No, I haven't gone.
I'll pass it to Janetta.
Good morning. Janetta is my first name. I actually go by Susie, but our district requires me to use my first name in these settings. I am the parent representative on the committee. I've been on here 1 year, but also this year I'm working with Josiah at the Williamson County ALC as an instructional coach. And so I'm excited to serve teachers in the alternative education setting this year.
See how that works, y'all? You get somebody in and then you steal them from a school and put them on your staff.
Perfect steal.
I kid.
Brian, we'll pass it back to you. I mean, Lee, we'll pass it back to you for the next item.
Oh, yes, ma'am. We're gonna review and approve the meeting minutes from the May meeting.
I sent
Has
those
everybody-
out in an email, so hopefully everybody's had a chance to review those.
Has everybody had a chance to read the minutes from May?
Is there anyone that would like to add anything to those minutes, or are we okay to approve those minutes moving forward? Okay, hearing nothing, we'll move forward with approval of those minutes, Lee, and move on to the voting process.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. All right. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
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 Hi.
Aye.
Any disapproval, say nay. All right, sounds like the ayes have it. So we'll approve the meetings from the May meeting, approve the minutes from the May meeting. Next order of business is to vote for council members. And Leslie, would kind of let us know about the reading, any openings on the board?
We don't currently have openings for council members right now, but we will be voting for the vice chair person and the secretary today. So the first item on that script, Lee, is
Yes,
to call
ma'am.
for the reading of the roll. I did that virtually, so we don't have to go through that process. So we're going to pick up with item B on that script.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm going to read the description of each office. And then after that, we'll open the floor for nominations for vice chairman, chairperson. The executive secretary records how many members voted and tallies for all votes. If the candidate receives more than 50% of the votes, the candidate immediately assumes the role for which they were nominated. If no candidate receives more than 50% of the vote, the executive secretary will administer a runoff election between the candidates receiving the top two number of votes. There can be more than two candidates in the runoff election if more than two candidates receive the top two number of votes. Repeat this process, and we'll repeat this process until there is a candidate with more than 50% of the vote, or until there's a 50-50 split. If all candidates receive an equal number of votes, but the results do not reflect a 50-50 split, the council must vote again. If there's a 50-50 split, the executive secretary will cast the deciding vote per the bylaws. Once the chairperson is elected, you return to step 3 and proceed with all the election of the secretary. Now,
on
yes,
the
ma'am.
next page, I'm going to just read through the responsibilities of each office on the second page of that script,
Yes,
and then
ma'am.
we'll move on to that third page.
Yes,
The
ma'am.
chairperson of the advisory council will preside at all business sessions of the council. Other duties will include keeping the appointees informed of council activities, working with the executive secretary to create an agenda, coordinating tasks and reports, and representing the council in various venues related to the essential functions of the council. And because Lee was our vice chairperson last year, he assumed the role of chairperson this year. The vice chairperson will preside at any meeting in which the chairperson is not present. The officer is expected to work closely with the chairperson in the performance of other duties as outlined above. The vice chairperson will always assume the role of the chairperson at the first meeting of each new year. Therefore, when a member casts a vote for that year's vice chairperson, A member is also casting a vote for next year's chairperson. This entails a 2-year commitment on the part of the person assuming this position. The secretary will be responsible for approving all minutes before they are sent out to board members for review. The secretary will also write a brief synopsis of the meeting that will accompany the executive secretary's minutes. In the absence of the chairperson and vice chairperson, the secretary may preside over the business meeting. The executive secretary will help the chairperson in organizing council activities, creating an agenda, and coordinating tasks and reports for the council. Furthermore, the executive secretary will act as a liaison for the Commissioner of Education, who will then report to the Governor, General Assembly, and State Board of Education. The executive secretary will record the minutes of all business sessions of the Advisory Council. These minutes will be delivered to each member no later than 2 weeks following a business session. This may be done via regular United States mail or email. Minutes will also be presented in hard copy form to each member at the next business session for approval. All council members must approve the minutes before they are entered into record. The executive secretary will also be responsible for drafting the annual report to the General Assembly. The executive secretary shall be appointed by the Commissioner of Education, who may also appoint other individuals from the Department of Education to help assist the council as necessary. Now that we've went through the duties of each officer as prescribed by the bylaws, we will proceed to the nomination and election process of the vice chairperson and the secretary. So Lee, I'll pass that to you.
At this time, we proceed with the nomination and the election of the vice chairperson. As listed by the bylaws, the vice chairman will proceed over any meeting in which the chairperson is not present. The officer is expected to work closely with the chairperson in the performance of other duties as outlined above. The vice chairperson will always assume the role of the chairperson at the first meeting of the new year of each new year. Therefore, when a member casts a vote for next year's vice chairman, a member is also casting a vote for next year's chairperson. This entitles a 2-year commitment on the part of the person assuming the post. With that, the floor is now open for vice chairman nominations. Are there any nominations for vice chairperson?
I'd like to nominate Josiah Holland.
Mr. Josiah is nominated. Are there any further nominations for the office of vice chairperson? Are there any other nominations from the floor? If there are no more nominations, nominations are closed. Ms. Watson, please read the name of all nominations.
The following nominations are made for vice chairperson of this council: Josiah Holland,
Now for executive secretary, the following members are nominated for vice chairperson of the council.
Lee, before we move to that, can we do the vote for vice chairperson?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll call each member's name and you can cast your vote. We only have one member, so it should be pretty simple. Lee Ferris,
Aye.
okay. Brian Douglas,
Aye.
Josiah Holland,
Aye.
did Sharon come in after we started? No. Melita,
Aye.
Susie,
Aye.
Martina?
Aye.
Okay. Lee, we're ready to move on to secretary.
Yes, ma'am. All right, the next position to vote on is vice executive secretary. The following nominees are nominated from vice chairman of the board. Anybody want to run for executive secretary or have a nomination for executive secretary?
This would actually be the secretary position because the executive secretary is appointed, but for secretary of the council is what this position would be.
Okay. For secretary of the council.
I'd like to nominate Brian Douglas.
Any other nominations? Brian, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Great. Now we're gonna vote, or are there any other nominations for secretary? All right, at this time, we'll vote for the secretary. And since there's only one, it's Brian Douglas, so this ought to be a quick vote.
Lee Ferris,
Aye.
Brian Douglas,
Aye.
Josiah Holland,
Aye.
Alita Thomas,
Aye.
Susie Estes,
Aye.
Martina Stone.
Aye.
Perfect. The election results are as follows. Josiah Holland will assume the role of vice chairperson, and Brian Douglas will assume the role of secretary for the council. And thank you, Lee, for doing such a good job in your first year handling the vote. I know it's overwhelming, but I'd also like to thank Courtney for making us a script last year, which was extremely helpful. I want to move on to our next topic on the agenda, which was a review of those bylaws. We talked about this in our last council meeting, and initially we thought there might be a few changes, but in the end there were a limited number of changes. So I'm hoping you can see this on my screen right now as I share the bylaws. I'm going to go to the sections that we highlighted as things that might need changing. And if at the end of that, there are other things you would like to add or discuss, we can go through those as well. The first item that we talked about changing was this reporting annually to the governor. This was changed to not a required report every year, but upon request. So that item would be report upon request. Even though we're creating the report every year, it's just to align it with the actual language. The next item was to present a hard copy form of the minutes. We were going to change that to an email copy form. This members may choose to participate via conference call to be counted in the quorum. We were going to change that to virtual. The notice, the public notice of advisory council meetings, we wanted to change this to 2 weeks instead of 3 weeks. Not sure on that one if we can do that. If a member of the general public wishes to make a statement before the council, they must send a written request to the executive secretary. We included email request in that. And I think that was all the changes that we ended up coming up with initially. Did anyone else come up with anything they would like to change or feel like needs to be changed in those bylaws?
No, can I ask a question though?
Yes.
How does the public, or even I'm thinking about Glenn, who I met this summer at the state conference, how are people made aware of these meetings? And is it something that I'm just curious about that part of it, like how how I would know if I was an ALC director not on the council or a parent, how would I know about these meetings?
These meetings are listed on the TDOE Alternative Education website, and it has links to all those meetings. So they would just go to the ALTED page, and all of the meeting links are on there. And Glenn actually had reached out to me, and I shared this with him, but they're
Wonderful.
always
Okay.
shared.
Great.
Okay, hearing no new changes, I'll pass this
Hey,
over to Sean.
Leslie, sorry.
Yes.
If you look, can you scroll down just a little bit to see that paragraph above 10? I'm sorry, the other way. Scroll up. Okay, yeah, the minutes and reports.
Okay, yes.
I'm just reports, recommendations. There's commissioner. Do you think, and this may be a question for our legal counsel as well, because I've seen this revised to say the commissioner or designee shall distribute all documents to the General Assembly. So I guess, Chandrea, if you have any thoughts on that, because typically it would be a designee or the commissioner's office.
And Scott, I'm checking the statute now.
Okay.
I think we can change the language to say the commissioner or designee, or we can change the language to say the commissioner's office. I'd advise commissioner or designee, just in case it comes from like our policy team instead.
Right.
Because and just thinking about many of our internal reports are shared with the General Assembly by the policy team. So I think we want to change that language to say commissioner or designee. So definitely
Thank you.
Andrea, can I pass this over to you for next steps on making those changes?
Yes. So if there are no additional changes to add to the bylaw language, I think we can use the voting script to go ahead and accept the recommended changes. We can also open the floor for discussion if there is any discussion regarding changes on the bylaws. But if no further discussion, then we can open the floor for voting.
Okay, I'll call each member's name and you can agree or disagree to the changes. Lee Ferris. Lee. I'll come back to Lee. Brian Douglas.
Agree.
Okay, got it. Lee, did you say you agree?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Josiah.
Agree.
Melita.
Agree.
Susie.
Agree.
Martina.
Agree.
Okay, that gives us everyone that's here, and I agree too. So we can move forward with those changes. I'm gonna move on to the update on the status of council members. I know there was quite a delay with the reappointments process, but I think we are almost finished. I know, Martina, you were waiting on your final signature, and we are still waiting on Mamadou's, but everyone else has an updated reappointment. I want to take a few minutes for each person to share any areas of concern or interest they'd like the council to take. But before we get started, I want to share some things that I listed from attending the TAEA conference. One of the topics that came up was the change in the search laws for schools. I think I have this. This changed, and it was a big topic for the people in my session because a lot of them were doing searches every day for every student that came into the alternative school. And the board representatives were very clear that that shouldn't be happening without reasonable cause. So the change says that
Let me just frame it this way. Hopefully, so
sorry, I think that was just some background noise. The change says that the searches of students and their property, including vehicles, lockers, purses, backpacks, could only be done by a school resource officer who is acting for the purpose of the search as a school official, by a school security officer, or a school administrator who had completed the training. And what we found was that a lot of those alternative schools did not have an SRO. So that was a big area of contention. And I think Josiah was actually in that session with me when a lot of those alternative schools were saying, look, we search every kid, all their belongings every day. And they were very clear that that should not be happening. So that was one area of concern I had. Another thing that I heard in one of my sessions was that a lot of alternative schools are allowing students to attend voluntarily, not for any discipline reasons. They were attending those schools voluntarily, and that concerned me. Another topic was that students in state's custody that are in group homes or returning to systems from placements were automatically enrolled in alternative settings. That was concerning. I heard from a couple of school districts that were kicking students out of alternative schools when they have multiple infractions, not zero tolerance, but just multiple small infractions. And then the final thing that I had concerns about were TCAP test scores, and of course test scores not being shared with the alternative schools. In that session that I attended, none of the alternative ed teachers ever received feedback on test scores. So those were my topics. And now I want to turn it over for each member to share not only their reaction to any of these topics, but any other concerns that you would have. And I will pass this to Josiah.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you to the TAEA. I know Lee has done a lot of work with the TAEA over the years, and I just really want to for the council to notice that and commend him for the work he's done in his tenure as a teacher and as a work on the board. I know he's put a lot of years and effort into that, so thank y'all. And thanks for hosting it this year in Springfield. Our team got to go. There was about 10 of us total that went, so we were really excited to attend, and a few of our teachers and some of our classified staff. So we had kind of a broad group. It was good to be with other alt educators around the state and just listen and learn from everybody and see how it informs our work and help us to be reflective on what is going well or what we're doing great at, and then learning some best practices. I got a lot out of the time with the instructional coaches. I thought that was really illuminating how they help support the academic processes at their school. I also had concerns. I think the concerns that I had, I would echo a lot of the things Leslie said. One of the things that may be unclear overall, and maybe the general counsel can help us as we guide this council in the work of alternative ed across the state. I know that every district is resourced very differently, and the bigger your alternative school, probably the more attention and energy you put into it. And something I felt over those 2 days we were there is that a lot of the smaller programs just have less resources, less attention, less training, and less sharing and learning about best practices, if that's true. But something that seems very vague in alternative ed in Tennessee is the pathway to get to what we call alternative schools. and the pathway to leave. So much like Leslie said, our district, we have a superintendent who's a lawyer, Jason Golden, who was never a teacher or principal like a lot of superintendents are. So he's very rooted in school law, and he's very tight about how our ALC is run. And he believes at the core that it's illegal to not allow a student to be educated, even if they're suspended to an alternative school for a really egregious zero tolerance reason, or if they're at our alternative school and commit a zero tolerance reason here. He believes it's illegal to ever completely kick a kid out of a public school, what we may call expulsion. I don't know if that's how the state interprets it or not, but what I hear from other alternative schools around the state is that they do remove kids for up to a school year, and it's on the burden of the family or the kid to be educated or to be homeschooled or online schooled or whatever. So I think it may help if this council provides clarity to all of our districts for that, because I think that's inconsistent. The other thing that I was curious about is, again, the pathway to and from an alternative school. Whether it's like these kids, for instance, we have a group home in Franklin called My Friend's House. We often get those students because they're in a level 2 DCS facility or group home. They go to public schools, and then they may commit infractions or have behaviors that get them suspended, but they're not automatically placed here. Is it better for them to be placed here and then have a period of transition before they go to a public school? Maybe, but legally, what are they supposed to do? In my mind, legally, they should just be placed in their public school, not placed at an alternative school unless there's a behavior that gets them suspended. Once again, I don't know if that's just a district by district practice, and the director of schools or whoever has the authority can place them in alternative programs, or if the pathway to the alternative program must be school infractions. The other thing I want to say, and I don't know if this is the right time to talk about it or not, but there's a lot of energy around opportunity schools in Tennessee, and there's new laws, and there's a couple of people who are driving that opportunity school movement, which looks like alternative charter schools. There's a guy named Greg Littman who has reached out to me in an attempt for me to start my own alternative charter school in this area. I haven't done that, and I don't have the desire to do it right now, but something that we hear every time I'm around alternative educators and principals is there's all these kids who do so well in our program and just want to stay, but they can't, right? They got to serve their suspension and then move out of that. I'm interested in pathways for students to either stay enrolled at an alternative school or for students to be able to matriculate somehow. And I don't know if it's a law that says this or if it's just, again, a district by district practice that we provide. I think that the concept is provide pathways for students to have alternative education. And I mean that in the purest form of the word, not just because of behavior, because of placement. But so I think of that on both ends, right? The kids who are getting placed in these schools that we're hearing about that didn't actually break school rules, the school or the principal or the district just thinks it's best for the kid, which to me is different than you're receiving a consequence because you broke school rules or broke the law, right? And then the other end is when kids leave, can we create alternative pathways for kids to either stay enrolled in a version of the program that's not as punitive or restrictive, or matriculates to an opportunity or charter school, or matriculates to an online school or things like that. Maybe that's part of the transition planning and all that. But yeah, I share a lot of the things Leslie said. And I just wonder if there needs to be some more clarity specifically on, can we really expel students in Tennessee? Like truly keep them from being educated? I think there needs to be clarity on that. And two, I think there needs to be some discussion about kids being placed and also kids going back to school and that whole process. I'm interested in it, you know. But thanks again for the conference and for hosting it. And I look forward for us to be involved more in the future. And I'll pass to Brian.
Thank you. I'll follow up with what Josiah said there. Now, Three Rivers is a hybrid alternative program. And hybrid meaning there are students here for discipline purposes, but they're also here for students who are behind on credits. We allow kids who need this kind of environment. And we've always operated that way. And for instance, we have had some kids who were eligible to return to their school, but there was a decision. Parents were asking, could they stay longer? We try to move our kids to the least restrictive environment, but there are some of our kids with huge emotional struggles, and our school is the best option for them. And so I've always operated on the idea we were there to do what was best for each individual child. And I know that our district allows us to create such a program. So it may come down to, Josiah, as you said, what your district, how your district sets that up and what the bylaws are. So does anybody, I'm curious if anybody else sees it differently.
So in Memphis Shelby County Schools, Brian, we do the same thing with our hybrid programs. We used to have in the past a program called Success Schools. So when a student finishes their expulsion time, then we would turn them into a success student because they're no longer expelled. And then they can stay as long as we have the space. If we have the space, we'll continue to educate that kid, because guess what they'll do? They'll go back to their home school just to get expelled again to come back. And so let's just say the paperwork, just stay, but they had certain things that they had to do as far as attendance and discipline, because their rules have changed. And then they became ambassadors for the school, and then ultimately they would graduate. And so that's the goal, right?
Right. And I got to view that program they presented at some of our yearly conferences in the past. It was a fantastic program where some of those kids got placed in jobs and that sort of thing, as I recall. Everybody left with like a new suit on their last day. I saw that. So that's a fantastic program. But I think that, you know, I like the idea of each community being able to design a way to serve their kids that best, you know, that best serves. Cocke County is 95 out of 95 in children who have been connected to abuse and neglect. And with that being said, we found that we're really working on that every school becomes a community school, and that it's school's your safe place, but that's not always the case for everybody. So anyway, that's how we've done things here. I had another question. I think, unless I misheard Leslie, was she concerned that some students were at alternative schools voluntarily or involuntarily? What was the statement you made?
Voluntarily, that some kids just preferred that setting, which in your case, Brian, with a hybrid non-traditional school, that's perfect because you do serve both populations.
Right.
But a traditional alternative school should only be for discipline reasons. But if you have hybrid non-traditional, I agree. It's a perfect transition. But and it might be that the people that spoke up in that conference were from hybrid non-traditional. I don't know, I don't know where exactly each one was from, but I kept hearing that a lot, and it was concerning.
Is this a good time to, I'm sorry.
That's all.
I wondered if this was a good time to ask Chandrea to kind of speak to the law and what could be a violation of the law, or if there's a little autonomy with all the things we're talking about.
Go ahead, Scott. I don't know if you were going to reference something first, but
Well,
I'll pick up after Scott.
Sure, I was going to reference the law actually. There's another layer to this, and that's any special circumstances for the student, especially like let's look at students with IEPs, right? IEP teams are going to make a decision. They're going to have to be involved with that transition back because they're coming from an environment that's entirely different, possibly, right, than coming back into your LEA, traditional school or not. But that team's going to have to weigh in on the unique circumstances for that student at the time that would trump anything that would be a district policy. So that's something to consider from a legal standpoint. But I'll just pass it over to Chandrea for anything that's non-related to IDEA.
And I'll say to kind of answer some of the questions that came up about whether or not there is flexibility in the law for different types of programs. There's definitely flexibility as it relates to building these non-traditional programs that serve multiple student populations, or students who are there for discipline purposes and students who are there for non-discipline reasons. There's also some flexibility in the law that allows directors of schools to have some discretion with making decisions related to students who are coming into their districts as well, looking at those students' discipline history, looking at the students' needs as well, and determining what's an appropriate placement for students. Our state board rule kind of supports some of that as well. I can share language with you all. I'm sure you all are very familiar with the statute and state board rule, but I can share some of that as well. And then some of the FAQ documents that we have available, if any of that is helpful. And Leslie, I'll share it with you to share it with the team afterwards.
Thank you, Chandrea. I think that would be helpful. Susie, we'll move to you for any areas of concern that you have.
Oh, thank you. I was just jotting down some notes. Of course, I am very, very new working in the alternative ed situation, but I had a son who was a student at Josiah School. And I want to share this, and I think I've shared this before, that I felt like there were aspects he received in the alternative education setting that had he received them in the traditional setting, it would have made a huge difference. I even felt that at the conference this summer, that the things that were being discussed by educators in alternative settings should really be discussed by all educators. And so the thoughts I'm having, and I don't know whether this is builds on to previous comments or not, but this idea of pathways for students who are thriving in an alternative education setting. And so my question is alternative education more than a consequence? And there are things happening in alternative ed that are indicative of a philosophy or different approach to education. And so I just am welcoming that idea and wondering, should there be an expansion of our definition of alternative education, or branches or paths off of it? And then the other thing I wonder is, what do we do that are specific interventions for students in the specific situations that had them be placed in an alternative education setting? And then what are we doing that are just general good practices that should be happening for all students? Not that all students need them, but all need them. So those are the thoughts swirling around in my head as far as conversations and things we could explore, I think, as a committee. The other thing that's swirling in my head is just becoming aware of the instructional support for alternative educators. And just talking with the teachers and how many of them have multiple preps. And sometimes you're facilitating learning with materials you receive from that student's homeschool. Sometimes you're teaching, instructing, and how do you balance both? And how do we increase the longevity of teachers in alternative education settings? And how do the ones that have been there for a long time, what is it that has helped them thrive and be successful? So those, from an instructional coach lens, are things that are going around in my mind. And then also that, what can educators in traditional schools learn from alternative educators? Because I believe y'all are an untapped treasure that we haven't given enough attention to. So that's it. That was a lot. Thank you.
I taught at, this is Lee Ferris. I taught at an alternative school for 18 and a half years. And what helped me get through it was my team. Everybody was focused. My grade level team, well, middle school, will meet like once or twice a week, discuss any problems that we have, and then discuss any solutions to help with the behavior. That did well because we're looking at each student from multiple lenses. And we was always able to get through, and some of the hardest knuckleheads, I guess you could say, at the end of their time, they were the ones that wanted to come back. Since the tougher they are in the beginning, the more they want to stay at the end. That's it. That's it for me. And well, they approved of the structure and being the safety was. All right, that's it.
Martina, we'll pass to you.
Really don't have a lot to say. But Leslie, yes, that is happening with our kids in state custody coming out of whether it's a residential facility or whatever group homes. We have some school districts that automatically are looking at alternative school for them. And I will say it's because they want to transition them to a regular classroom eventually. Because you got to remember residential facilities, much smaller classroom, very therapeutic, of course. And then to take them out of that setting and expect them to thrive in a full high school of over 1,000 students is just, it's a lot, and it can be very traumatizing. Hopefully it is a decision, a CFTM decision around where they're going to be educated, and hopefully they're reaching out to those residential facilities teachers to get more input. I really encourage that. And I don't know how often that is happening. So hopefully we can improve those practices. But I will say that I'm not against this practice, because I do know that it can help and assist the situation if a child comes out of a residential facility and goes straight into a regular public school, that you're already looking at issues and problems that arise. I feel like there's not enough support for the child. And then if there's not enough support in the school, then usually there's a disruption with that placement, and then that child is being moved again, which is just another traumatic experience. So, but I definitely think we can improve those practices. Other than that, I can understand why kids would like to stay at alternative school. It is a much different environment. It's very consistent. It's calm. It's safe, and there's boundaries, and they know those boundaries immediately. And you're right. Some regular ed teachers could really learn a lot by visiting some alternative schools and seeing these practices that alternative teachers are using every day in their classroom. So that's all I have.
Thank you for sharing, and thank everyone for sharing. I definitely think that we have some good topics for professional development opportunities for the year, which is what I want our primary focus to be. And having worked with kids in a residential setting, I've experienced firsthand how much they prefer alternative settings because it's structured, they have support, it's a smaller setting. I just want to make sure that for those students that do feel like they're capable of attending public school, that they have the opportunity and that's not taken from them. Melita, did you have something to add?
Yes, ma'am. I had some concerns about RTIB. As I always look at the RTIB scale, I don't see myself or alternative schools represented on there. And so I've been working with my district because I'm off the pyramid, right? If these things have been done before, they've already done these things before they got to me. So I need them to add another layer, which is us. And we're doing that because we need different supports than what they've already done. So that's one. The cell phone law that's now implemented, I think is going to be some issues. is job security, because I think some students are going to end up getting expelled at a certain point because it's going to turn into situations where students will get a little out of hand because of the phone. And then the TAEA conference, do we all know where that's going to be next year and like when? Because I have to plan in advance, and it has to, hopefully it's before July because, you know, money drops and all those things. And that's what I needed to know.
Lee or Glenn, can you speak to the location and date of that conference?
Yes, ma'am. We're tentatively looking at the Preston Hotel on Briley Parkway. And we're going to be in discussions with them.
That's in Nashville?
Yes, in Nashville. And the reason we have the conference in July is because if we have it in June, all the tassel credit and all this other credit goes to the previous year, because you still work anything until July 1st goes to the previous school year. So most people want to get tassel credit or professional development credit, but going into the new year. So that's why we do it in July.
Okay, I just have to figure out how to, we have to turn everything in. You know how you had to turn in everything before July 1, and then after July 1, you got to wait. Takes a minute. So I'm just trying to see how I can get there and somebody pay for it. Unless Lee can pay for it for me.
Oh, Lee's got big pockets. I heard he could do a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, Miss Leslie. Hey, that conference is tentatively scheduled for July the 8th and 9th, 2026.
Before we move on, can anyone else speak to what they're doing with RTIB in their school?
I can speak to it a little bit in Williamson County. It's a newer concept. Truthfully, we're always a little behind on things because, well, I'll say it as nice as I can. When you're in a high performance school district, people don't always think you need to change things, right? So I liked what Melita was saying about the pyramid, because what we've kind of said is the pyramid starts over when they come to ALC. If there's a tier 3, if you take the tiers 1, 2, 3 and put them on almost like a tier 4, the tip of the pyramid, you walk in the door in a tier 3 place like ours. We have our own tiered system, if you will, what all kids get, what some kids get, what very few kids get, not to mention special education and all that. So, but we're doing a lot of work around restorative practices. I'm a trainer, so we train our schools. We're starting to do a lot of work in the elementary schools because we know that's where it starts, right? We've trained all of our counselors over the last 2 years and given them access to the restorative training, and really trying to rethink everything from building community to culture and responding to conflicting issues through a restorative lens. So, but we're finally kind of putting together an MTSS in Williamson County Schools. Again, we're just kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit, but it's happening and it's becoming more holistic in our district, but a lot of energy is around it right now for sure.
This will be good to come back and revisit this at the end of this council year and see how that's going, Melita and Josiah, just to see what the results are. Susie? Susie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. Sorry. My observation about RTITB, and I'd be really interested to hear more about in the elementary level, tier 2 and tier 3 interventions seem to be a little more intuitive. And I'd love to hear more over the course of the year about at the middle school and with middle school and high school students, what do tier 2 and tier 3 behavioral interventions, what can they look like? And I totally agree with what you said about the ALC being, or alternative education being in the pyramid as well. But I do think that in the traditional schools at the secondary level, I see, in general, I see just more understanding of what a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention could look like for students of that age.
Perfect. I'll make sure to add this to the agenda in our next meetings and we can just revisit it and see what the progress looks like. Okay, I want to thank everyone for sharing. I really do think this is a wealth of starting points for our PD for the rest of the year. Now I want to take a brief look at the ALTED survey and talk about where we are with that and how our changes panned out. I want to say that the survey is all in. We got 100% completion. So for the second year in a row, we had 100%. I'm sure you guys remember the changes that we worked to enter the school number so that we get an accurate report of schools and programs. I want to say that was really productive because it came down to 24 schools and 152 programs, which was exactly in line with the school directory. As far as trends go, the average length of stay increased. K through 5 from 22 to 44. The length of stay increased across all grade levels, but it doubled for those K through 5 students from 22 days to 44 days. 6th through 8th grade, it went from 48 days to 57 days. And grades 9 through 12, it went from 57 to 61 days. Overall, we had a 2% decrease in number of students served, so that's great. It's the first time there was a decrease since COVID, and we can't really count that one. So 2% decrease in numbers served from 16,439 to 16,122. We had an increase in grade bands 1 through 5. We had an increase in numbers served from 704 to 787. That was the only grade band that showed an increase. Decreases in 6 through 8 from 5,243 to 4,896, and a decrease in grades 9 through 12 from 10,492 to 10,439. So it was pretty consistent. The reasons for placement in alternative school was really consistent. Violation of school rules was still the top reason. It was up from 54% last year to 58% this year. Second was zero tolerance issues, which remained exactly consistent at 29%. And then the third reason was need for alternative education strategy, which was down from 17% to 13%. Request for technical assistance was exactly the same as last year, with transition planning and support being the number 1 request, exemplary practices being number 2, digital and virtual learning number 3, and alternative education survey being number 4. Biggest challenges were consistent with last year's responses. Parent guardian involvement, of course, remains number 1. We all know that's a struggle. Resources was number 2, staff hiring and retention number 3, budgeting number 4, climate and culture rounded out in the 5th category. I do want to say that the annual report has been written and submitted to comms last week. So as soon as I get that approval, I'll be sharing it with each of you, and then we will make it available on TDOE resources and on the ALTED website. There is one important note here. I know we worked really hard on making those changes to the survey, but what I did not know when we made changes was that there was grant money out there for SROs and alternative schools, but not alternative programs. So after the survey was developed and sent out, I ended up collecting information on physical locations of those alternative programs. So I want to include that when we revise the survey next year. Does anybody have any questions about that ALTED survey and that annual report?
I have a question.
Yes.
I know what the survey looks like once it's published and we get it. The data you just shared with the trends, is that in the survey as well?
It is.
It is. Okay, great.
I added several several items to the survey that were not there before, just that would make it clearer to follow.
Okay, great. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to looking ahead. And like I said, I really want this year to be focused on professional development, and based on responses from LEAs, I want to do professional development for that transition plan that we worked to create last year. And my plan is to do at least 2 virtual sessions that walk people through that transition plan and really increase the understanding with LEAs that that transition plan should be created not only when a student returns to the home setting, but when they transition from the home school to the alternative school and back again. So I really want to develop at least 2 training opportunities, one in the fall and one in the spring, that will walk them through that transition plan. And also, I want to include on the survey next year. This year, we just asked for a blank copy of the transition plan, which doesn't really give us an accurate picture of whether or not it's being done. So next year, I want to ask for a completed copy. So I want to make sure that that training is available to LEA so that they understand the process. The next item would be to discuss the development of a monitoring system. Right now, alternative schools have a limited amount of monitoring. It's really only one piece of the RBM, and it's a small piece. So that is something I want us to develop, and I would like to ask that all council members bring some suggestions to the next meeting of things that would be included, and we keep in line state board rule when you're creating those lists and the model standards. Not only suggestions of what should be included, but also suggestions on format, like would it be a checklist? Would it be actual documents that they upload? But please bring to the next session suggestions for things to include, and then a method of delivery. The next item is the possibility of a non-traditional education conference in April. It is only a possibility. It's not confirmed and will be dependent on budget. And I know there are lots of budget restrictions out there, so it's very likely that it might not happen. But if it does happen, I would like to include alternative education sessions, and I would be interested in council members attending and presenting if it does become a reality. So just be thinking of that. And as soon as I hear, I'll share it with you guys. So be thinking of topics, things that would be useful. If you have any tips for virtual offerings, any online programs that you're using, that would be an important part to include. And the other item that I did not put on here would be those changes to the ALTED survey that include the physical location, a completed transition plan, and any other suggestions that you all have that would just strengthen that survey and give us a better picture to include in the annual report. Does anyone have any questions about the plans moving forward for the year or anything they'd like to include?
No, ma'am.
I think it's fantastic. I think these are great goals, and I forget my letters, NEP conference we did a couple years ago in Murfreesboro, I thought was really successful, and it was nice to have all these different people in the room who do kind of unique things, getting some similar PD and training, and I thought that was a real success.
I agree. I really enjoyed that conference, and I actually think you were on a panel. I think that's where I first met the advisory council. They had a panel discussion at that NEP conference, and it was great. Okay, before we close, I would like to set the quarterly meeting dates for the remainder of the year. I sent out some dates in the email. Hopefully you've had a chance to review it. I'll just go through this list. I'm going to choose the first one for November 6th. Does anyone have an issue with choosing November 6th as our second quarterly meeting date? Okay, hearing no objections, we'll set the second one for November 6th from 9 to 11.
I've got a meeting till 10 that day. Could we do it after 10 o'clock that day?
Would November 11th be better?
Yes, it would for me.
Does anyone object to November 11th?
I'll be off that day.
How about November 13th?
I've got principal meetings that day.
Okay, let's back up to November 6th. And you said, Josiah, you have a meeting at 10?
Yeah,
Or
8:30 to
10?
10.
Okay,
8:30 to
so
10.
let's set it for November 6th from 10 to noon.
Great.
Does that work for everyone? Okay, November 6th, 10 to noon. Quarterly meeting number 3, Thursday, February 5th from 9 to 11.
I've got principal meeting that day. The only difficult one, I'm sorry.
Let's try Thursday, February 12th, 9 to 11. Any objections to that one?
Yes, ma'am. I have a VA appointment that day. And it takes an act of God to change those.
Yes, we don't want to interrupt that. How about Tuesday, February 17th from 9 to 11? Okay, it looks like that's our winner. Tuesday, February 17th from 9 to 11. And our final quarterly meeting, Monday, May 4th from 9:30 to 11:30. Okay, that one was easier. Oh, Lee, did you have a conflict? Okay, Monday, May 4th, 9:30 to 11:30. All right, guys, that was the end of the agenda items. I just want to say thank you all for coming back. Melita, did you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. What is the lady's name that trains for the incarcerated youth program? She does the training.
Aaron Christian?
Christian.
Yes. I've tried to contact her and I hadn't received anything back. Is she still there working with the dish, working and doing things?
Yep.
He is still on our team. If you send me the email, I can get in touch with Aaron and get back to you.
Okay, I'm just trying to see when the next training is. I almost missed it last year. I want to make sure I'm there because there's always some different rules and changes.
I'll make sure I get the message to her, okay?
Thank you.
Are there any other final comments before we close? I just want to thank you all for returning this year. I'm excited to really get into the professional development aspect. I know we were really busy last year creating the transition plan, changing the survey, but I think we made some really great progress, and I'm really excited moving forward.
Leslie, I have a question, and I don't know if it's possible because it deals with budget. It would be to have what used to be there, do school visits and have the board members split up into 10 different alternative or non-traditional schools, not to grade them, but just see what they're doing, whether was something that could benefit other schools or not.
I do love that suggestion, Lee. Funding, of course, is a really tricky issue right now. Scott, could you speak to that at all?
Yeah, it's something we can consider, and I can ask our assistant commissioner in FPO, like what the possibility is. Do you recall when that happened? It was board members, you're saying, Lee, that would go visit different alternative programs or schools and just kind of see what's happening? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
sir. And
Okay.
it's been a while back when Kay Davenport was on the board on the.
Yeah, it was pre-pandemic for sure before
Mhm, mhm.
last time we did that. I think the pandemic sort of shut us down and as to how we once met. And so around 2019, 2020 in there somewhere.
Okay.
Leslie and Scott, my thought is this, in the concept of visiting other alternative schools is to like elevate that idea of just visiting for the sake of visiting and getting best practices. But as you look towards a monitoring system, what if we took qualitative data on those visits? Because I feel like the instrument we have right now for the survey is powerful. But it's all quantitative, right? It's all numbers. But I wonder if we could do visits in a qualitative kind of study that might lead to a monitoring system that's powerful and rigorous and does more of just like telling the story of what supports and interventions are in place. And then we could come back to the table with the monitoring system and think holistically how that could inform the monitoring, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And Leslie and I had a pretty thorough discussion this summer about expanding, looking at some type of monitoring instrument that could collect some of this data, Josiah. Now, when we are out just on level 3 results-based monitoring in the LEAs, we do ask the LEAs about alternative education and some of the requirements that are involved. It's typically around special education, ensuring that the special education students are getting what they need to and from part of those requirements. But I know that we had some other hands come up. I'm not sure who popped up.
Easy.
I was just going to say, I don't know if there's any type of instructional practice guide for alternative education settings. And I think what's most powerful is if this committee were to make one, and then that's the tool you use when you visit, because it also can become a reflection tool that you use within your school as to what do we consider high quality education in this setting, and what would that look like? Not in a top-down evaluative way, but in a community. We have created this standard together, and we're going to celebrate it when we see it, and gather evidence to how that's happening, and also what challenges prevent us from doing it.
I think that this council kind of did that. They worked, and I think several members that are still here that worked on the model standards for alternative education in Tennessee, they're out there, but I think there's a lot of turnover in alternative schools, and maybe that information doesn't get passed on to new staff members. Josiah?
Yeah, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves talking about the monitoring system and discussing that next time, but rooting that, if we have these practices, which I'm looking at the website we have, I think rooting in that is really powerful because there's a lot of great things in there. I went to the national conference for ALTED last year in Tucson, and they're very similar, right, in structure to what's happened on a national platform. And I think there's a lot of good work that's already been done and that we could just kind of build off of.
We'll keep that in mind when we come together for our next meeting to bring that list of items and with specific focus on state board rule and the model standards. So things that we can include, and we don't want to make it a scary thing, but we do really want to get an accurate picture of what's happening in ALTED in the state. Well, I will give you guys the back part of your day, and I thank you all for coming. And I really look forward to our next meeting and the rest of the year. I think we can make some really good improvements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all
Have a
for
good day,
taking
everybody.
your time.
Thank you. Happy New Year, everyone.